We are the land of the free and the home of the brave, highlighting pillars of our society such as free speech, freedom of religion, and economic prosperity. Yet, when we think about the land of the free, do we rarely think about our fellow citizens that are behind bars and shackled to the never-ending loop of mass incarceration? Currently, the United States has 2 million people in prison, the most people incarcerated worldwide. The United States has 25% of incarcerated people in the world, with only 5% of the world's overall population. Over the past 40 years, the population of prisons in America have filled from nearly 41,000 people in 1980 to 470,000 people in 2015. These statistics are the root of any conversation on mass incarceration, yet they don't answer any of the questions about financial impacts, discrimination, societal effects, or fairness of the legal system.
Mass incarceration refers to the methods and extent of which the U.S. has been sentencing a large number of citizens to federal and state prisons. This mass imprisonment has been proven problematic, resulting in financial liabilities for the federal and the state governments. These cause immense legal costs and higher taxes on citizens, which leads to questions over the justice system's involvement with an extensive amount of prisons that exist. Disparities in the legal system have brought debates over discrimination regarding race, people with disabilities, and certain areas with high levels of poverty being targeted for arrest. A prosecutor with the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office in Boston, Adam Voss, reveals some of the underrepresented aspects of the mass incarceration discussion.
The more contact Christopher had with the criminal justice system, the more likely it would be that he would return again and again and again, all at tremendous social cost to his children, to his family, and to his peers. And ladies and gentlemen, it is a terrible public safety outcome for the rest of us.
These issues that Voss addresses often go unnoticed, with little consideration given to the mental health of those imprisoned, the effects on families of those incarcerated, and the opportunity, or lack thereof, for those incarcerated to get a job when they return to society. Coupled with our alarmingly high recidivism rates, one thing is clear. The criminal justice system is definitely open for scrutiny. With all the questions surrounding mass incarceration, it is important to make the distinction of what exactly is mass incarceration. How does mass incarceration affect communities and societies both behind bars and free? Is the United States criminal justice system moral or even humane?
The current correction system has caused an enormous financial strain on both state and federal governments. The United States currently spends over $80 billion a year in costs for incarceration, which contributes to the overall $270 billion spent on the entire criminal justice system. Incarceration spending covers the cost of living in prisons, probation, parole, staff, and maintenance. This is the idea that private prisons have a high maintenance cost, and that is the main factor of the increase of tax burden placed on citizens. However, private prisons are only an extension to the public incarceration system, and the government payroll for corrections employees is over 100 times higher than the profits of the private prisons industry. In 2010, the average U.S. citizen gave $260 towards the correction system, compared to only $77 in 1980. Considering that a large portion of prisoners committed nonviolent crimes, many states are questioning whether spending this much on prisons benefits society. The financial strain of incarceration is not solely affecting citizens, but also the convicted. More times than not, money is a deciding factor in both a convict's possible prison sentence, if they are sentenced at all. Regardless of the crime, if a criminal is unable to pay for legal fines, it is possible for them to receive jail time. This illustrates the stigma that people with more money can escape the law because they have the advantage to hire private attorneys and pay for processing and bail. In 43 states, defendants can be charged for a public attorney, and in 41 states, criminals can be charged for room and board after their sentence. Because of that financial burden that imprisonment places on the convicts, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in Bearden v. Georgia that courts were not to imprison probationers solely on their inability to pay fines if they have demonstrated an effort to pay the fines in any way. Despite the national government's attempt to mitigate the role money plays in punishment, this ruling has been found to be negligent in the courts, disadvantaging convicts even more.
Mass incarceration has profound social effects on individuals circulated in the system. During the time the inmates are sentenced and eventually released, they often lose family connections, certain liberties, and job opportunities. These realities of life in prison likely lead to those incarcerated returning to jails and prisons, as shown by our high recidivism rates.
Convicts are ineligible for welfare, student loans, public housing, food stamps, and are often socially disconnected from community and family support structures. So in addition to having high recidivism rates, they have very high rates of homelessness and suicide.
Mass incarceration has led people to fall into a cycle of crime, which has increased their recidivism rates over the past few decades. A study conducted in 2005 by the National Institute of Justice tracked just over 400,000 prisoners from state prisons in 30 different states and recorded how many of those subjects went back into prison. The results revealed that within 3 years of release, over 2/3 of those being observed were rearrested, and 3/4 of the same subjects were rearrested within 5 years.
And people are currently in prisons and jails across the United States. This is according to the latest government figures. It's also estimated that 97% of them will return to their communities after they are released. But reintegrating into society can be a challenge that many are not ready to face as ex-cons struggle to get jobs or find permanent housing.
There are barriers which prohibit someone with a criminal record to find work after their sentence. Employers oftentimes are fearful of the individual being hostile and violent in the workplace, as well as becoming an insurance liability for the company. Companies are hesitant to hire recently freed prisoners as they question their work ethic, ability to bond with coworkers, and other soft skills. Other obstacles in the way of ex-prisoners attaining a job include the lack of word processing skills, which hinder their resumes, cover letters, and highlighting relevant job skills and experience. Attire, demeanor, and body language all affect the way a job applicant is viewed, and are qualities generally lost behind the bars of prison.
Spillover effects impact the children with family in jail, specifically parental figures incarcerated. These effects include depression and anxiety symptoms among the spouses and children of those behind bars. Along with the social aspects of mass incarceration, it is important to observe some of the flaws of our criminal justice system. 2 points that emphasize some flaws in the system are the way juveniles are treated and the discrimination witnessed in our incarceration rates of minorities. The heart of many problems surrounding incarceration is the clash between rehabilitation and blind sentencing. Juveniles are frequently sentenced to solitary confinement for 23 hours a day, sentenced for nonviolent crimes, and given criminal records for lighter infractions. A focus on more citations and rehabilitation instead of having adolescents placed in jail cells with people twice their age and size provides an alternative to blindly sentencing solely based on the crimes committed. Citations and programs for youth outside of prison walls can potentially lead to a more successful future with gaining employment and finding suitable housing. To quote Tom Tillis, a Republican senator from North Carolina, "We believe Congress has both a moral and fiscal imperative to ensure that our criminal justice system appropriately calibrates sentences to offenses. That is being smart on crime, not soft on crime." Recently, these topics have been agreed upon in Congress because of the increasing evidence of the impact it has on the general public. In this light, the Senate Judiciary Committee passed the Sentencing Reform and Corrections Act on a 15-5 vote. This bill marks the end to solitary confinement for juveniles in federal prisons and mainly focuses on the importance of rehab to reconstitute the families of those incarcerated. Another disputed problem facing the justice system is the disparity between the incarceration of whites and minorities in the legal system. African Americans hold 67% of the prison population and only 37% of the United States' population. Hispanic males hold 22% of the prison population. However, African Americans are 6 times more common to be arrested compared to a white male and 2.5 times more likely than a Hispanic male. Along with these statistics, there is evidence that demonstrates that poor areas in the United States have high imprisonment rates. Other explanations for racial disparities fall under the policies and practices implemented in the justice system, coupled with bias and stereotypes driving decision-making.
There are many debates over what exactly caused such a high number of prisoners in the United States. Mass incarceration is a complex issue. It is difficult to identify a single cause, as well as one central issue within the justice system. Some arguments place the blame on law and policymakers, given that sentences for drug-related crimes seem to have increased. However, the blame cannot be placed entirely on law and policymakers. Drug-related crimes account for only 16% of current sentences being served in prison. The number of inmates in prison for drug offenses has been decreasing steadily since 2006. Many experts conclude that although there are issues with the sentences for drug offenses, the federal war on drugs is not the primary cause of mass incarceration. Another problem placed on law and policymakers is harsh sentences. Although there have been many cases where an unfair sentence was given, the average sentence length generally hasn't changed over the past few decades. Approximately 1/2 of all prisoners serve sentences between 2 to 3 years. Only 10% serve more than 7 years. John Pfaff of Fordham Law School has theorized that many of the issues with mass incarceration can be accounted for by prosecutors. Over the past 20 years, prosecutors have been more likely to issue felony charges, which leads to plea bargains and prison sentences. These theories do not explain our high recidivism rates or the disparities within the prison population, bringing us back to the statement that mass incarceration is a complex issue. The cause of the problems associated with the United States justice system and prison population cannot be explained by one cause, but perhaps requires an in-depth analysis of the many contributing factors of various levels of the legal system. Identifying these causes is not a simple task, and providing clear evidence has been proven to be even more difficult.
Hey, that's just the way we talk in the clink. Been a lot of fun talk about prison today, but I am here to scare you straight. I am here to scare you straight!